Through the process of building a motorcycle, expect to make a few mistakes. Some are going to be those really easy ones to fix, and other ones are going to be lessons learnt, and you'll never make that mistake again. And that's exactly what happened to me with painting this motorcycle tank. So the paint on the outside wasn't actually the issue, it was the inside of the tank which was the issue. It's a 40-year-old tank and it had a few little veins of rust, and the fuel had actually seeped its way through the little veins of rust and separated the paint from the steel on this tank and caused it to bubble, as you can see now. So this paint job is completely destroyed, but what I'm going to do to stop this ever happening again is I'm going to seal the inside of the tank with a KBS motorcycle tank sealer kit. It comes with everything you need, and I just need to make sure I prep the tank perfectly, and then I can pour in the tank sealer and swish it around the tank and make sure it's completely sealed, and then pour it out, let it dry, and we are good to go, and this will never happen again. You may have to do this tank dance a couple of times just to free up any of the flaky rust that might be inside your tank. I'm just using some nuts as well as washers inside the tank with a bit of distilled water and just shaking it around. There was quite a substantial amount of rust that I ended up pulling out of this tank. There's only 3 major steps to doing this. The first one is using the AQUA to clean the tank. The second step is using the rust blast to get rid of all the rust. And the third step is to seal the tank with a tank sealer. It's as simple as that. Just a couple of things to note, there is 2 different size kits. There's a 20 litre and a 45 litre kit. The 20 litre is probably perfect for all the vintage tanks, and anything bigger than that or some of the new bikes will have a bigger surface area. So just double check that before you order the tank sealer kit. I highly recommend, if you're going to do this, to make sure you follow the instructions to the T. They're really easy instructions to understand. Don't skip any steps and don't be impatient if you want this to work properly. Preparation is the #1 key to success when you're doing this. If your tank isn't prepped properly, nothing's going to stick to it. So the AQUA is diluted with hot water 1:1 ratio. Pour the 1:1 ratio of AQUA inside the tank and let it soak. Move it around in intervals so that you make sure it's covering all surface areas inside the tank. It could take up to 24 hours or maybe even longer sometimes, depending on how much gum and varnish you have inside that tank. Quite often this needs to be done twice, so pour it out, have a good look inside there, use a torch, see if you can see any areas that need to be concentrated on more, and pour it all back in again and let it soak. Once you get to the rinsing procedure, make sure you rinse it really well with water until it runs clear. Just hang on to your rust blast as well as your AQUA. You can reuse these again. In some instances, depending on where you're located and what sort of water you're using to flush this out, you may find some flash rusting, and the best way to stop that happening is go and get some distilled water, and you can get that from the supermarket and it's quite cheap. And that should prevent flash rusting as much as it can. So step 2 is removing the rust, and all you got to do is grab the rust blast and pour it straight into the tank. You don't have to dilute this one. All you have to do is rotate the tank every 5 minutes for a minimum of 20 minutes. The one thing you do have to remember is don't let the rust blast dry on the tank. So make sure you keep rotating it so inside that tank is always wet. It's essential that you don't let this dry on the tank. So let's see how the rust blast did after leaving it soaking for a while and also shaking it up with a bit of chain. Wow, that's incredible. For such a short amount of time, that rust blast works incredibly well. Now it's just a matter of rinsing the tank out with warm water, and I would highly recommend using distilled water to avoid the flash rusting as much as possible. The next step is just to let it dry. You can use compressed air or a heat gun. I did a combination of both. You could also just leave it in the sun for as long as you can to try and get that tank to heat up so it will evaporate any of the water, but just make sure it is completely dry before you move to the next step. So I've cleaned this tank out completely on the inside. I've de-rusted it with a rust blast. That stuff is amazing. And now I pretty much spent 2 days drying this thing out. I could have done it a bit quicker, but I just wanted to leave it for an extra day just to make sure it's completely dry before I put the actual sealer in. And there's something still left in there, so I don't know what that is. Let's have a look. It's like right at the top here. I've got it. I've just got to try not to drop it in there. And there it is. Now for step 3, sealing the tank. It's a matter of popping the lid off the can and thoroughly stirring it, but don't shake it. I believe that must be for bubbles, I'm assuming. So once you've got it stirred and the tank's completely dry, pour the entire contents of the can inside the tank. If you have a nicely painted tank, you don't want to get this on the paint, so what I would recommend doing is cover your entire tank with maybe some painter's tape or even putting wax over your entire tank.
15 minutes starting now.
So once you pour the entire can into the tank, it's just a matter of rotating it for no longer than 15 minutes, but just make sure you rotate it in every direction you can possibly imagine to cover all of the surface area inside that tank. And just periodically check it every now and again with a torch to make sure you are covering everything. Some tanks are a little bit harder to drain than others, and if you find that you're having trouble getting the excess sealer out of the tank, just get a stick with a bit of rag attached to the end of it, or even if you can get a syringe with a tube and you can just draw out that last little bit of sealer, and then you're good to go. And that is pretty much it. Once you follow those instructions, now just let it dry. And then if you're going to paint the tank, you can go ahead and do that now, or you can fit it back onto the bike and fill it with fuel and you are good to go. If you're going to go to the procedure of doing this, I highly recommend getting yourself a good quality brand, and that's why myself and many other bike builders choose KBS products. They have proven themselves time and time again, and they're just super easy to use. So that is completely dry now. It's glossy and looking delicious on the inside. I wish I did this from the beginning. So there's been a lot happening on this channel, and just to give you a bit of an idea, my friend and I, Willis, have been working on this behind the scenes. It's a top secret project that nobody knows about yet. Next year we'll be releasing it, so look out for that. And if you've enjoyed this video, you're gonna love this playlist that I put together.